Thank you, Alexandre, for this introduction. Hello, everybody. My name is Caroline Paul, and I am the Managing Director of Marketing Tourism Agency here in Paris. And I will be the moderator of the Chinese travel panel today. First of all, I'd like to introduce the panel member. On my left, you have Alexandre de Sainte-Marie. He's he multicultural consulting director at DataWorks. Next to Alexandre, you have Hélène Lemuet. She is the VP International at Le Figaro Media. At my on my right, thank you. You are Emmanuel. Emmanuel Tisser is the VP Business Development at DFS Group. And next to Emmanuel, we have Antoine Peignet. Antoine is head of e-commerce hub of APAC at Air France KLM. Thanks to all of you for being here today to talk about Chinese travelers. As you know, Chinese tourists love shopping. They tend to make their purchases during overseas trips. The World Tourism Organization estimates that 100 million Chinese tourists will travel outside China by 2020. It's a large part for the reason why Chinese travelers are currently in the center of luxury brand strategy. And a very good example of this is Mercedes-Benz. Last year, Mercedes-Benz created a surprise with an amazing strategy, building its presence in the luxury tourism industry with a new brand named Mercedes-Benz Travel. The goal is to provide an experience not only in a country but also in a Mercedes car during the trip. They are linking a travel experience with brand awareness, which is a very, very original strategy. So Emmanuel, I would like to start with you. Regarding the Chinese travelers, I used to talk about the Chinese traveler as a new Chinese tourist, a new generation, younger, tech-savvy, and most of all, independent. You worked in Asia for several years for some luxury brands, and I know your office here in Paris now allows you to observe tourists whatever you want. What changes have you observed? And perhaps would you like to make any predictions?
Prediction, hello everyone. Prediction, no, not yet, Madame Soleil, it's not me. But now what I will say about Chinese travelers is, first of all, the 100 million, it's already the case, because you had last year 109 million Chinese travelers outside of mainland China. From them, 70% went to Hong Kong and Macau, as Erwan mentioned this morning, Erwan Rambourg. 90% stayed in Asia, and only 3.6% went to Europe. Only 3.6%. And you have the feeling that you have a lot of Chinese in Paris. You have the feeling that you have a lot of Chinese in London or in Milan. It's nothing. It's nothing compared to what's going to happen. Second point, you have on the quantity of Chinese, the way they travel, it's changing extremely fast. We mentioned this morning the word speed. And the speed happened not only in the capacity of switching from one city to the other to consume or to discover or to look for a brand, but also the speed in the way of traveling, which means up to 5 years ago, 80 to 85% of the Chinese were traveling in group tour, following a little flag. Today, last year, 70% of the Chinese traveling abroad were ditching, in fact, group tours to go independently, to travel independently. Today in Europe, if you focus, because we are in Paris, I can tell you about Europe. In Europe, we consider that 70 to 80%, we don't have precise measure of this, 70 to 80% are still in group tour because they are not yet familiar or in capacity to go to step into a new culture or complex culture. Second point. And my third point will be about, I will start to talk about the profile of this Chinese consumer and traveler. I will mention two things. We generally talk about Generation X, Generation Y, etc., etc. I will not say that. I will say we have the Mao generation on one side, and we have the one-child policy generation on the second side. One-child policy means you have single kids, single baby, who are now adults, and who are now plugged, over-connected, and ready to travel anywhere in the world, because they are transversal. They look at the world at their home, you know, first. And you have the other kind of group, in fact, that generally travel still in group, that are the Mao generation, what I call them the Mao generation, because they used to live in a different world 20 years ago. Because 20 years ago, it was a different world, totally closed. Then these people are a little bit reluctant to travel by themselves. They still follow a flag. But the young Chinese that I see in this room, you don't need any flag anymore. You go by yourself, and this is the point, my first point.
How would you compare the Chinese tourists, Emmanuel, today with the Japanese travelers of the 80s?
But it's simple. The Japanese are like their culture, that is to say, they take time. They take time. The tea ceremony, if you have ever been in Japan, you know, be ready, huh? It takes a lot of time. Forget meetings, no, nothing. Wait and look. And the Japanese did the same in their travel way, in their way to discover culture, etc. They took time, and you still have a lot of group of Japanese who started to travel in the 70s. Okay, really, there was a peak in the 90s. Mostly 90% in group tour, mostly in Pacific, and then after in the US, and then after in Europe. The Chinese, they did in 5 years what the Japanese took 30 years to do. In 5 years, you have this shift from group tour to individual approach. This is, for me, the difference.
Yes, and I know you used to call them now PIT. We used to call in tourism FIT, but you used to call PIT. I like this term.
You have another way to segment. We are in marketing because this is part of our job. And yes, of course, we like to segment people, to put them in boxes. There are 2 points on this. The first one is we heard this morning Mr. Kais from Albatros mentioning the fact that no more second, third tier city to segment people. We are talking about segmentation for retail. Okay, the concept of cities segmentation was adapted for retail. It's a concept who came from certainly people from McKinsey. Hello, if you are here, or BCG. The point today is that we are looking sociologically at the consumer, and this is the way we have to address our approach of the Chinese consumer. First, that is to say, rich people, less rich, young, less young, etc. Second point, the kind of consumer that we are talking about, I was talking about group and individual. Within the individual, you have 2 kinds of people. You have still the people who are like you, like me. In some countries, in some places, I don't feel at ease to go by myself because I know that I will not have the same access to some cultural experience, some culinary experience, some people that I would like to meet with or to discuss with. Then I will become a PIT, a package individual tourist. Means I will call Kuoni, we are in France, which is one of the leaders in Europe, or whoever travel agency, and tell them, I don't want to follow a flag or a group, but I would like you to prepare my trip. And this is what I call the PIT, because still today the Chinese, and especially the high-income revenue Chinese customer, are still PIT, but there is a third difference, that I want to mention, because this is something that, it's my observation, you were mentioning about observation. I have the chance to work on the top of the Champs-Élysées, then I'm regularly like that on my balcony. And there is something that appears to me, which was absolutely amazing, is the fact that Chinese are traveling, the adults are traveling with their kids. It was not the case 5 years ago, believe me. In Singapore, we had some kids. I was working in Singapore for the Fendi brand. In Singapore, we have kids because there was an entertainment approach of Singapore. Casino, entertainment with Universal Studio, etc., and shopping. But in France, in Europe, in Italy, etc., you didn't have kids. Today you have. In the past 2 years, you see a surge of families coming with their kids, with friends. That is to say, you have connection now with the way of traveling of the Brazilian, for example. Brazilian travel, I've lived in Brazil, and I know a lot of Brazilian, and I welcome them often in Europe. Some of them. They come with family, uncle, everybody, and the kids and everybody. And you have to drive that, and I tell you, it's a mess. But it's funny, you know. And the Chinese now are doing the same. You know, it's a family approach.
Perhaps, Alexandre, could you explain a typical Chinese traveler, Emmanuel, plans his trip in great detail. You talk about that. Alexandre, what maybe you can talk about that also. The preparation before the trip is very important. We talk about that this morning also.
Well, just a few ideas about this preparation of the trip. Obviously, the Chinese customer is highly connected, and we have talked about this subject earlier before, so I will be quick. I just would like to insist on one specific point. I mean that the digital world and the real life are not separate. I mean, you are not split as a person in two separate parts. So it's very important for luxury brands to have first-class shops, I mean flagships, in continental China. Not from a sales point of view. Obviously, you have to sell your products and your lines and your collections. But you also have to let these future Chinese travelers enter your world, enter your specific brand experience. And in 90% of the situations, this future Chinese traveler gets information on internet. He will ask friends to give him advices on a specific brand. He will exchange on social networks and so on and so on. But at one time, he will feel the need to enter a flagship store to really discover the brand universe. I mean, not only products, but to have the possibility to talk to a sales lady, to have the possibility to, I mean, touch the products, feel the products, weigh the products, hear explanations, and so on and so on. And this first experience of the luxury brand, it plays a decisive role when traveling abroad. Because if your first experience in a flagship store in Guangzhou, in Shenzhen, or in Shanghai is not a first-class experience of the brand, obviously, if you are disappointed, you won't have the same feelings and the same attitude towards the brand once you're traveling abroad. It's a crucial point. Just consider that in cities such as Paris, or let's say in touristic cities, you must know that 60 to 70% of total revenues are made with Asian travelers. And in this global revenues, obviously Chinese travelers plays a major part. So they prepare, they go on internet, they exchange, they take advice from their relatives, from their family, from their friends. They discover the brand. In most situations, they feel that prices are very high in China due to several reasons. I mean, taxes when importing luxury goods from abroad, and so on and so on. And very often, their first purchases, they are made outside continental China. I mean, you know figures. Let's say that 75% of total purchases of personal luxury goods are made outside continental China. But you still have to build a very, very, very distinctive, exclusive, and first-class quality distribution network in continental China if you wish to really attract these Chinese travelers. Okay?
Thank you, Alexandre. So it's very important to create a local experience first in China before traveling. As experience is a notion very important also during the trip. Emmanuel, could you talk about experience of shopping? What do they expect as the shopping experience?
I'm not going to take the the role of my friend of Air France and KLM. The experience starts with the travel, first of all. I think it's key. You were mentioning the experience starts with the flagship store. Just to give you an example about experience, when I was heading Fendi in the south region of Asia, for 1 year, I push all my teams on the floor to welcome the people differently and to say, welcome to Rome, because Fendi is a Roman craftsmanship brand, luxury brand, and we were saying, welcome to Rome, because yes, it was the first step into a Roman experience. And it was quite fun, because we had some very, very funny reactions sometimes. Rome? You know, where? I'm not in Fendi. Yes, you are. You know, all this approach of the experience, experiential travel is key. The second part is I take a plane. This is a key part also, especially when you take a European plane, a European brand, or an American brand, etc., because it's part of the experience, you know. Luxury is not only when you are luxury or consumption, is not only when you are stepping in a store, you are stepping in another kind of experiential environment. Third point, arrival. Arrival is a key point in Europe for us, and in the US, by the way. Is the arrival in our airport, the main hub, the main door to our European world for the Chinese travelers. It's a key issue. It's a big issue. You wait for your luggage, you have da-da-da. You have people looking at you like that, etc. And it's not only for Chinese, and just for my friend Chinese here. It's also for everybody, Guaylo. The point of the experience, it's all this journey. We are talking about the Chinese journey, consumer journey. And the last one is arriving and experimenting. And this one is key, because today, what I was mentioning before, these people following a flag, what are they experimenting today, honestly? I'm not going to mention any brand, but you have big department store all over Europe or in the US, and what do you see? The flag disappear, and you have a kind of invasion of 30 people who want to start to queue in a very well-known brand, okay? And this is their first step into a European luxury environment. Do you really believe that it's a luxury approach, a luxury experience? I'm not sure, personally. Then there is a big issue. First. But on the other side, because of the increase, the huge increase of individual tourism, individual traveling, we have the chance to change this experience, to change our approach of the customer, the Chinese customer, because we are going to have a one-to-one approach with them. We are going to give them what they are expecting from luxury world, from a world they believe it's unique, etc., etc. And we are going to give them a key moment, and I like to use this word, and it came from my son, 13 years old. It was quite funny. Authentic. What do you expect from a luxury brand or a luxury store when you step into the store is authenticity. Okay? You expect to pay high, not only a product, but you expect to pay high something which is authentic, which has been made by hand, etc., etc. This is all about the experience, and I can tell you that today we are talking about luxury brand, but I can tell you that tomorrow we are going to talk about not only brands that are selling bags or whatever, but we are going to talk about, of course, the Guy Savoy at the Palais de la Monnaie on the River Seine. We are going to talk about Italy, the concept of food in Milan, Rome, and everywhere, and soon in Paris. These experiences are key to attract the foreigner in general, but also to attract the Chinese. The last thing will be they will want to understand the people they are visiting. Understanding means not only language, but be received, talk to families, walk in gardens. That they will disappear from the Champs-Élysées. They will start to do what, for example, Venice lover does. After you have visited 3 times the Piazza San Marco, what do? You try to enjoy Venice in a different way, and you lost yourself in Venice, which is quite easy, to be honest. You're always lost in Venice. And you lost yourself in Venice, and you start to really do the sponge and absorb the culture. And this is what's going to happen, and my belief is really what's going to happen with the Chinese consumer, because they're fast, and this is what they look for.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Antoine. Antoine, Air France KLM is a quite large company with a growing business from China now. What do you think about Chinese tourists and the experience with the Chinese tourists with your mission?
Yeah, we are a pretty famous brand here in Europe. However, in China, we are nobodies, actually. Yeah? Air France and KLM, the European leaders in China, are not very well known. And actually, KLM, we did a study a few years ago, and KLM logo was shown to people to measure the brand awareness. And actually, people thought that KLM was a dairy brand because the logo looked a bit like Parmalat. So we have a long way to go to build the brands there. Also, to put things in perspective, we mentioned a few times this morning the outbound travel, 100 million travelers. This is still ridiculous compared to the total number of travelers, because still more than 85% of the overall Chinese travelers travel within China. And that you realize easily when you go to Tiananmen Square or any of the big Chinese attractions. You hardly see any Occidental tourists, because they are lost amongst thousands of Chinese tourists. So by far the Chinese destinations are #1 destinations for the Chinese. So it's in total, I think this year will be 700 million. Travelers combining domestic and international is 100 million. And the evolution of that, so it's hard to, nobody has a crystal ball, but let's say the average of what I can read and see amongst the experts and provisions is that by 2030, the total number of travelers will be 1.7 billion. So that's an additional billion travelers, Chinese travelers, in the next 15 years. So that's 2.5 more than what we had in 2012. So that's quite a lot. So that's 2.5 more, but if you look at the total value of the market, so the nominal value, how much people will spend for travel, you multiply this by 5, because travelers are going to travel further and further away from China. So that's quite a lot. It means that if you go this weekend at the Eiffel Tower and you spot the Chinese tourists around taking pictures, you can imagine that in 15 years there will be 3 or 4 times that many Chinese around there. So that's a good business of opportunity, let's put it that way.
Sure of that.
So that's in terms of volumes, that's huge. Then in terms of behaviors, I totally follow what you said, is that the group tourists, well, as of today, is still, for Air France KLM, the biggest part of leisure travelers. But we do see this trend of independent travelers more and more trying to have authentic experiences, go out of the beaten track, spend a week in the Bordeaux area to learn about winery and that kind of things. And we do see that more and more, which is good as far as I'm concerned, because I'm in charge of e-commerce, and those people book online instead of the group travelers.
It's the evolution.
Yes, yeah, that we see. And the book online, they're also very active, as you mentioned, on social media.
Yeah.
So we do see this trend also. They're extremely connected, I can confirm that. On Air France, we did a study lately, more than 95% of our Chinese travelers travel with a tablet. In the US, it's 81%, so it's way over the US. Yeah, so that's the kind of difference we do see in the Chinese travelers versus the rest of the world.
Okay. How will you communicate on these new tourists, connected new generation of tourists?
We of course communicate about the product because, as I mentioned, we need to educate about the product and trying to reach the people we are looking at. So it's a small portion of the Chinese yet, so we have to target who we talk to. And we also have to let aside sometimes the traditional territories of Air France as a global brand. Not put them aside totally, I mean, but focus on other areas that are not necessarily the primary areas. So I can take the example of gaming. We had this discussion, yes, I think yesterday with other panelists. We did an experiment lately with gaming, both at Air France and KLM. I will start with Air France. We had organized at the boarding gates of 2 airports a game where we asked basically the passengers waiting in the boarding room to play a game. So they were asked to download a video game on their iPad or telephone. And in the boarding rooms, we have set a bunch of screens where the scores of the players were displayed in real time. So first, second, third, and it was updated as people were playing for 20 minutes. And the top scorers was in the end upgraded in business class. And the message here was to promote our new business class. And why did we do that with gaming, which can be surprising with Air France? That gaming is a mainstream social reality in Asia that not only touches on the young generations, but it touches all ages. And this is very strong. It's a deep reality in Asian values. And we wanted to insert the brand in that environment. Also, because Air France is changing its positioning slightly those days. You will see the new TV ad launching this week. We wanted also to show the brand as more playful. And this video had a huge success in China, huge number of views and press coverage. So that's how we used one example on how we engage with Chinese customers through a specifically Chinese or Asian social behavior. Another example that I can give for KLM, still around the gaming experience and trying to explain the product and explain that we don't do milk, but we actually take you to Europe, is a game that's called Aviation Empire. It's been developed by KLM for the last years already, and it's basically a strategy game. So you have to be the CEO of an airline and build basically the KLM airline from the first Cessna aircraft in 90 years ago up to the space if you're good enough. And this game was launched in the Netherlands at first and internationally communicated, but never in China because it's not available in Chinese. And we realized actually last year that right after the home market of the Netherlands, the second market was China, although in terms of downloads. So there were a really huge number of downloads coming from all over China, whereas we never talked about the game at all. So I don't know even how those people found out about the game. And not only were there a huge volume of downloads, but they were also the most loyal, so they were the most active players in that game. So we are currently developing this game also in Chinese for the Chinese customers, and just as a way for us, gamification to explain the brand. And in this game, you can see the values of KLM, you can see the history of KLM. History is very important for Chinese customers.
Yeah, sure. Storytelling.
Yeah, exactly. So that's examples on how we did address Chinese customers just to communicate on the product and the brand.
Okay. Gaming is very interesting to engage tourists, to engage consumer. Could you talk about that, about gaming on luxury market, on luxury customer, Alexandre? About gaming game in the luxury market to attract and to engage luxury Chinese travelers? No, it's not a good idea for luxury market to engage the consumer.
I think that to engage the Chinese customer, I would refer to authenticity, what was mentioned before by my friend Arnaud. It's very important for a Western luxury brand when considering this Chinese customer not to be colonialist in the approach, not to try to push your culture as a Western luxury brand, but to be very respectful of Chinese cultural habits, Chinese social habits, and the way they perceive your culture as a foreigner. And if you don't push, if you simply express your culture as a brand from a digital perspective, it means that you say people, okay, look, my authenticity is so, so, and so. My values are so, 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 and so. And you let them enter your brand universe. So it's very important as a Western luxury brand, for example, to adapt your digital contents so that when you are in continental China, when you have your local version of your website, the brand looks like as it were actually a Chinese brand. I mean, when expressing yourself, try to be as Chinese as possible when you express yourself in continental China. But in the same time, try to be as Italian as you can when expressing yourself as a brand when you are in Milano. And try to be as American as you can when expressing yourself when you are in San Francisco or in Vancouver, or not in Vancouver, in Los Angeles, let's say. And this is quite a challenge because you have to consider two opposite objectives. One is to be as local as possible, and the other one is to stick to your international identity as a luxury brand, because otherwise it's a chaos, you know. So you have to be as local as possible while taking into account your core values, your mission, your identity as a brand, as a luxury brand. And this is part of the game, because this Chinese traveler, it does not want you to make faces or to cheat him or to try to say, oh, look, I'm 25% Chinese and 75% Italian or French. He wants you to be authentic, and as a luxury brand to be either French or Italian or Russian or Brazilian, while being respectful of his own culture. And this is very important as far as digital strategies and digital contents are concerned. Because if your website looks as if it were a Chinese one, obviously people will say, okay, they take into account the way I consider internet. They take into account the way our local websites are developed, and they will feel at ease, and they will immediately perceive that you are respectful of their own culture and their own habits. And let me just tell you that it gives you an extraordinary chance to be well perceived and to gain their loyalty. And these people will enter your world when they travel to France, when they travel to Italy, when they travel to the United States of America. They will enter your world because their first impression of you as a foreign brand, as a Western brand, for digital, for internet, was a positive one in continental China. So be as Chinese as you can when expressing your brand identity and your brand values in China. This will provide you extraordinary results as far as sales are concerned when these Chinese travelers will come to your headquarters, will visit your country in France, in Italy, or
during
in
the
Brazil.
trip. During the trip. Thanks, Alexandre. Emmanuel, you want to say something?
Oui, I would like to follow and to, how to say that, to express the fact that I agree totally with Alexandre, but on one point, authenticity also can be expressed in China, can be expressed when you are in the Asian world. And I would say that you have to do it also. You can use the code of the local culture, the code of the language, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, they are stepping into a store which is Chanel, they expect Chanel. Even in China. And if you are too Chinese, it's not going to work. They come to Paris. If they don't find any waiter unpolite with them, they will say, "I'm not in Paris." You expect an unpolite waiter in Paris. It's normal. It's part of the culture and part of the experience. Then this is the point. For me, be yourself. I have launched Veuve Clicquot Champagne not totally in Asia, but in China in 2000. I was coming back from Beijing on a flight, not Air France, Dragon Air, and there was a big gentleman just nearby me, and we start to talk, and the guy told me, "You are drinking good things." I was drinking a Coca-Cola. I say, "Yes, I like Coke. I like bubbles." Because I was always thinking about champagne and bubbles. He said, "Yeah, me too. I'm the head. I'm the boss of Coke." I say, "Bonjour, monsieur." Wow. Big boss of Coke China on the both aspects. And we started to discuss during 4 hours, the 4 hours of the flight to Hong Kong. And the guy told me, "You know what? Your champagne story is great. But believe me, it's going to be hard." I said, "Why?" "I'm here for the past 7 years, and Chinese don't drink bubbles. They don't like bubbles. It's a nightmare. I went through a nightmare. I have 7 factories all over China, and it's a nightmare. It's extremely difficult. The only bubbles they are drinking is beer." But at that time, we're in 2000. It's like the last century, when you think about that in terms of our world today. And I left this trip. I was very happy of this meeting. It was very interesting to meet this gentleman. But I left the trip. I was so down. I said, "My goodness, I'm going to launch a champagne in a bloody world where they only drink tea." Or water, hot water. Because in China, you drink hot water. And finally, I met a young Chinese marketing director I had working with me, and she told me, Vita, she's the head of communication for Louis Vuitton now in Asia. Vita Wong told me, "Emmanuel, don't do that mistake. Veuve Clicquot, there is only one widow. Let's make it like that. Let's communicate on this. Let's be ourselves." And she was the first one. She was Chinese, Hong Kongese. She was the first one to push me and to say, "No, let's go. We continue. We deliver our message. It's the story. This is what we need to do. But we will have to educate." And there is another word that I wanted to add on all this, about experience, etc., etc. It's education. It's not educate, I'm going to educate you because you are uneducated. It's educating about our cultures, our product, our brand, etc. But keep the things authentic. This is what I think. When we go to Air France, we expect to have an Air France way of doing the things, of service, etc. We are not expecting Singapore Airlines. And the ladies coming here like that, it's a different story. I will not mention anything.
Thank you, Emmanuel. That was great. Hélène, you are the international VP at Le Figaro Media. Brands are now not only advertising to the current market, but also on the tourist market. The Figaro Media has addressed this for several years with a publication called Paris Chic. And you launched last February a WeChat account for Chinese tourists. Could you talk us about that?
Yes. Hello. Thank you. just to carry on with the Champagne experience, we are, so for those who don't know the Figaro, we are 1826, born in 1826. They're sort of the most established newspaper in France, probably center-right versus our main competitor, center-left. But, you know, we have a very strong base in the luxury segment, and as such, our code, our behavior, whatever we organize events and so on, are very much driven by this sort of very high standards of, welcoming our guests. And recently, I'm going to come back to it in a minute, but we now welcome most of the Chinese guides. We do seminars for them in-house. We do a lot with the Chinese travel industry in Paris. And I had 50 guides coming to a cocktail when we launched the Figaro Chic. Plus the travel agencies, plus the airlines, plus, you know, the deputy for the Chinese ambassador in Paris, and so on. And my PR director said, "Oh yes, I'll do everything." And she said, "Oh, it's all in control. There's champagne and more champagne." And I said, "You know what? You should really try and find something else, because the champagne, they don't drink that much champagne as yet." She said, no, it's got to be champagne, editorial director's going to be there and so on. And after the event, she said, "I don't know what was wrong with the champagne. They hardly drank any champagne." And I said, "You should have put red wine, for example. You would have been very successful. Or hot water, And she just looked at me. So there are cultural differences that we try to address, and it's not, always easy to get by. But it's true that when they come over, they expect a certain experience in Paris, and I strongly encourage you, and then I'll move on to serious stuff, to go and watch the play, which is called How to Be a Parisian in 1 Hour, which is really, really funny. Only takes an hour, and it's about this guy who tells you a lot of anecdotes about, badly behaved waiters, badly behaved taxis, how when you get to the Tour Eiffel. I mean, it's quite funny. So I really, if you have time one of these days, to go and attend it. So as far as we are concerned at the Figaro, it's now 5 years that we've worked on the Chinese travel market. We started off the main reason was, how do you develop your brand with the Chinese and not in China? And traditionally, media groups go and they set up local editions of their titles, which we have with Madame Figaro. But with the Figaro Daily, we had a different approach, and we thought, why don't we try to spread the Figaro brand through the Chinese travelers coming to Paris? That was at the very beginning a lot of avant-garde, and I must thank our partners here, among others, Care Media, who really listened to what we had to say and said, yeah, well, why not? We'll follow you on that route. Why is it a challenge as a media group? Is because in order for this to work and be read, because at the end of the day, we sell readers, so we need to have readers. We had to anticipate and target the travel loop from the beginning to the end. And the travel loop in China, for Chinese, starts in China, because they prepare their trip really ahead of time. So how were we to distribute this content to the Chinese travelers? We didn't want to do mass, because this is the business plan, the business model of this is self-sustained by advertising. So if I wanted to be mass, I had to print hundreds of millions of copies. We don't have this money. Our advertisers don't have this money. So it was like filtering and trying to find channels whereby we knew that we were going to be distributed to the right people. At the time, 5 years ago, it was mainly groups. It was probably 90% travelers were groups. So that's how we started off, with tying up with the biggest tour operators, distributing doing package tour for the Schengen zone. But then it became private. The private individual is growing. So how do you address these guys? So then you talk to the visa centers, to embassies, to airlines. We're on China Easterns, on Business and Fast, for example, and you do a total different type of distribution segment. But that's in China. So how do you explain to a media agency or to a client that you're coming to see them for a title which will be read by people who will buy in France, but in fact is distributed in China for 70% of the quantities? What they say to you, they say, go and talk to my colleagues in China, because your main distribution is in China. So you do that, you go to China. But then the Chinese people say, hang on a minute, you want me to finance a media that would actually, you know, influence the buying or the bottom line of shops in Paris? No way. I'm not doing this. So it's all educating, you know, on both sides, you know, and luckily some agencies started to think as a travel market as the sixth continent, specific budgets, and I really encourage you to look at this, not just for us, but, you know, out of the big billboards at airports are part of this strategy nowadays, and so on. So I think at this stage, when we first started, a lot of brands were saying, oh, don't need you, they all go to Galeries Lafayette and Printemps, and that's it. That's where they do my buying. Yes, but yes and no. Nowadays, there's a logo fatigue. There's different audiences that come, Chinese travelers, you know, that are more and more sophisticated, as you were saying, looking for authenticity. And actually, it's a great opportunity for you guys, for the brands, because 5 years ago, it was so hard to get the Chinese to get into the stores. Nowadays, they're craving for it because they're craving for the experience. They're craving for the brand experience. They're craving to be part of it. You know, because by experiencing a brand, they feel as if they learn something, which is true. I mean, they learn about a brand, yes, but they learn a brand means a lifestyle, it means history, it means culture. So when they get out of that store, they have learned something. Whereas in big department stores, what they do is transactions. You know, they buy and go. And do they learn something? No. So usually it's different Chinese people anyway. First-time buyers, first-time comers will go to Galeries Lafayette. Second time, third time, more established Chinese people will come to the stores. So that said, it was very good for us, because whether 5 years ago we were judged as slightly too sophisticated, nowadays, because we have, you know, great editorial floor that cover brands, but from gastronomy, hotels, luxury, wine, beauty, they cover that on a day-to-day basis. So we have a lot of content, and content is key. I mean, I've got my colleagues from the New York Times here, and you would agree to that. And we were able to actually continue in what we always believed from the start, which was quality content, telling stories, telling sagas. Why is this designer famous? Why do we recommend this product? And not just say, this is Louis Vuitton bag, and this is how much it costs in such a store, but more what's behind the brand. And nowadays, I think we were a little bit too avant-garde 5 years ago, but nowadays, actually, the quality circle we do with the Chinese travelers, they tell us this is exactly the content they're looking for because they want to learn. They're really craving for this and getting, you know, criteria and understand why we prefer such a brand, why we dress like this, what we eat and with what wine. This is the kind of information that they're looking for. I must say that I'm really helped because Figaro, although we're very, very French, we believe that we understood very quickly that we needed local talents to help us. So we recruited one and two and then a second Chinese lady that are here. They don't have an easy role. We don't have an easy role, but it's always a question of, you were saying, you know, talk Chinese or talk French. Well, actually, it's in between, yeah? I think this is part of our success. And then finally, what I would say is because of these individual travelers, we just realized that we couldn't just do the paper. We needed to move digital because information is sought digitally. So we did that, but we thought, how do we interact with this reader? Because this is what we want. So then we thought about WeChat, and Caroline's partners, Curiosity China, helped us to set the account. And then the brands got interested because with WeChat, you have to be highly practical and highly services oriented. And because we are not the brand, but the media, sorry, we are now able to launch special lucky draws, which the Chinese love, of gaining private experience, personalized experience at the heart of Paris with specific brand or with specific museum, because we talk about brands here, but you know what? In Paris, we have a lot of museums, great heritage in culture, and they too are looking at the Chinese communities and the Chinese travelers. So a museum, for example, the Musée d'Orsay, we work a lot with them. Just as a little quiz, guess how many, I don't know if you know the Musée d'Orsay, which is great impressionist museum, right? Ideally located in the heart of Paris. They only have 2% Chinese visitors, 2%, right? Because Le Louvre takes everything, right? So they come to us and they say, help us, how can we work together? So we went into gaming and lucky draws. So for individual travelers, we put tickets for a lottery to win, and or coupe fil, or whatever it takes, Chambord, the castles do that in France as well. So I think for us it's great as well, because culture is part of our heritage. It's not only just luxury brands, it's everything really. So these entities are really looking at what we are doing. So at the end of the day, what I wanted to try and say is, if you look at our sort of activity here, first of all, you know, it remains really small at Le Figaro. You know, 95% of our business is domestic still. We're one of the big ones in Paris, but we're a small groups. We're 2,000 people. We're a 550 million turnover, so it remains kind of a small entity. The Paris Chic is part of our diversification, and just to give you, that was to summarize the steps. First of all, we launched the print, right? And we thought, let's see. It was still a time where we could still have a little bit of fun and allow ourselves to make mistakes. So we just tried it and it worked. I'm not sure if we were to launch it now, whether we would do it this way. We have a great editorial director as well, Anne-Sophie Fontclair, who really followed us in this experience. Then we thought, well, we really need digital, mainly at the beginning for content purposes, because, for example, we have the fashion weeks. Right? We do chronics every day, double page during these fashion weeks. Before the website, we had to wait 3 months to publish this. After 3 months, after 2 days, the Chinese are so social media oriented. That said, it's not worth it. So we had to move into digital for this reason, also for preparation purposes and services purposes, because you can do your shopping list, you prepare your trip online. And then for the interaction, we had no choice but having a WeChat account. And then finally, to complete, we will launch our application probably in the next few months. But we're really, we're learning a lot. We have Chinese colleagues in Shanghai that help us. So we play the local talent cards. I think what I find is with my French colleagues, because you may have noticed that I'm Scottish, half of my part anyway, is to say to them, you know, loosen up. You know, you cannot control everything, especially in China. You have to use your instinct and go by ear and play by ear and, okay, take some little risk from time to time. But this is what I think we're gaining and we're learning with our partners in Shanghai that are doing the design, the hosting, the technology, and so on. And with the brand partners, which I really thank for those of you who are supporting us with your trust and your advertising, I think we have a lot to offer in the sense that over the past 4 years, working with the Chinese is not one angle. You have to be multifaceted and address a lot of different activities. And over the past 5 years, we've gained very strong connections with the guides, with the travel agents, with the banks. I don't know if you guys have been to ICBC Bank, which is one of the biggest Chinese banks in the world, and they have an office in Paris. When you pass there's a double glazing door, then you buzz again, and you get in there right across Galerie Lafayette. It's like you're in China when you walk in there. There's not one single European face, and they've been there for 10 years. So it's really a way of operating that they have. And then so we've got to learn them, and now we have a network that allows us to be able to organize, for example, traffic to store. During the Saint-Valentin, we organize a traffic to store evening, very personalized with a luxury brand. And we learned a lot. We learned about the kids. We hadn't thought kids were going to come along, so the kids were bored. We hadn't learned. We did a lot of activities for the women, nail bar, makeup. What about the men? Well, the men, we gave them a glass of champagne, but it's not enough, you know. Yeah, maybe. We learned that, you know, they need a lot of guidance and how they need the guidance and so on. So I think this is what Figaro has to offer to you in terms of, and we're very humble, we're only at the beginning, but this is what we try to do. We're not just saying, yeah, put some space in here. I think we understood that we're addressing a community that has needs, and if we want to make it efficient for our clients and for the readers to enjoy it, then there's got to be some add-on activities on the side.
Thank you, Hélène. It's very, very interesting, and it's a very interesting example, as we say. Emmanuel.
Yes, sorry. I wanted to just rebound on the authentic experience again, because you mentioned Galeries Lafayette, Printemps, Rinascente, or whatever, Harrods. Have you been there, all of you, even in the US, for the past few months? Do you see Guaylo face or Chinese face? Behind the counter, Chinese face. And the big issue I see today, I have nothing against Chinese, of course. What I'm saying is that the big issue today is that our authentic message in the big department store, in most of the big luxury brands, in now all the big brands are not authentic message visually. Sorry, this is true. That is to say, you are stepping into Hermès, Faubourg Saint-Honoré, just to say hello to Mr. de Seine, or stepping into Galeries Lafayette or even Rinascente in Milan, and who are you seeing? Chinese. And when you start to speak with them in French, they say, pouvez parler à mon voisin? I'm joking, of course. It's exaggerating, of course, what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is about authenticity, what we were mentioning, etc. And I remember what you said about Galeries Lafayette, about the Figaro, etc. We have small issues. We have to be authentic. You can be Chinese and authentic salesperson in Hermès or whatever. It's not what I'm saying. But we mustn't forget what are the message, what we convey as a message for the customer, Chinese customer, going through media, going through experience, etc. It's fundamental.
It's a language. It's a language issue mainly. When a lot of
but the language issue. When I'm in Beijing and I'm looking at art business or whatever, I'm talking to Chinese people. I'm not talking to French people. I'm coming. I'm prepared for that, you know, and this is my job to be prepared for that.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you, Hélène. I think it's time to stop. Alexandre, do you want to say a last thing?
Just to say a few words about this authenticity question. All surveys which are realized by major consulting firms, they show that these Chinese travelers now, when they travel to Paris, exactly, they've moved from discovering luxury brands via department stores to monobrand stores. And now, as they are more discerning people, they select historical shops for the brand. What does it mean? It means that when they are asked, for which reasons did you choose to buy your luxury product, let's say in France? Obviously, there are taxes reasons, price points issues, counterfeited products issues, and so on and so on. But main reason in most cases is the fact that people say, when I am Rue Cambon, when I am in Chanel Rue Cambon, it gives an added value to my purchase. When I am Avenue des Champs-Élysées in Louis Vuitton, it gives an added value to my brand experience. When I am 24 Faubourg Saint-Honoré at Hermès, it provides me with the feeling that I really enter the brand, that I really become part of the community, part of the brand. And it's, I think, a small testimony of the way these Chinese travelers become more and more discerning and more demanding. And luxury brands, they have big efforts to be part of this new level of demands from these Chinese travelers. I can tell you that.
Thank you. I think we have run out of time, so thank you. Thank you, everybody. Do you have any question, any comment here? Yes, thank you.
Hi, I'm Ching from Megaphone Media. I'm actually from Canada, and I just want to make a comment. What I specialize in actually is advertising, digital advertising for ethnic audience outside of mostly Chinese and South Asian and other ethnic audience, most outside of their home country. So I wanted to, I totally agree everything that you said there has to be authentic when it comes to brands. And I'm a Chinese myself, so I totally agree. Because Chinese buy the brand for their value, for their history, for everything. So if you change that, then you lose the value. They're not going to buy it. They'll move on to another one. But the thing is, the key of education is very, very important, because that's what I found with publishers, with advertisers. I work with a lot of advertisers in Canada, as well as publishers in China. And you are basically working with two different beasts, two different systems. So in able for smooth advertising, marketing, you have to educate. You have to educate your advertiser. You also have to educate your publisher in order to build a bridge, which, how should I say it, which comes to data is very, very important, is to leverage those connections. So I just want to make a comment because I totally agree everything that you say there, because it's just, that's what we are seeing in Canada. If you go on the street, especially downtown, you see mostly Chinese faces, ethnic faces, and they are the one who goes to luxury stores. They are the one who buy the real estate, just like that. They have a lot of funds, outside to move outside of their home country. So that's just the point that I want to make. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hélène.
Well, I just want to respond to you because there's something that we're really bringing up at Le Figaro, which we're talking to the brands about the Chinese-based community in Paris. When we started, it was like, no, we don't want to be involved. They're not the Chinese that we're targeting. And because, the Chinese, they stay among themselves, they don't tend to mix too much, although this is changing. And they also have, they're the ones who are buying the cafe and, sort of low-profile businesses with a lot of cash involved and so on. And there was always this, from the luxury brands, this attitude that, no, I want to talk to the travelers, not the Chinese base here. But it is changing, especially with the Gaidu system, where, there's a lot of ordering of luxury brands by the people who are based in Paris. That's the first thing. And also, I think luxury brands are realizing that there's so much interaction, that a guy who is sitting in Paris, when he goes on holiday to see his family for 3 weeks around Chinese New Year, well, actually, if he's bought a Mercedes in Paris, chances are he will push for his family to do that in China, and vice versa. So this is really changing. You're talking about ethnic advertising, and I think that we've really started connecting with the Chinese media based in Paris, such as Chinese news and so on, whether it's television, print, or radio. We're doing more and more with them.
Any other comments? Yes.
Yes, hi, Julia Gessner, Gully Consult. I have a question for Air France, the KLM. You said your brand isn't very well known in the Chinese travel market, but as you point out, the independent travelers booking more and more online. So how do you attract them? Are you finding they're going mainly through Ctrip and Elong and online booking, or are you doing some special marketing effort to get them? How are the percentages and elevating your brand?
Yeah, we do as much as we can, but we are not luxury brand, so that may be a distinction I could do, except if you travel La Première, then you're in luxury, but actually travel nowadays is more maybe a commodity, maybe I shouldn't say that, but so we have different problematics than the luxury brand. So how do we address our customers? Well, I think it's pretty...
But most of your
answer that we
bookings
saw is-
coming through like
Online
a,
travel agency or,
yeah,
or
a
if
kayak
you-
type thing, but the Chinese version, or are they coming straight to your Chinese website and booking
Directly.
online?
Still the purchases are made mostly on our websites, but a lot of traffic comes from the Tunar, which is the equivalent of kayak, for example. And Ctrip is a bit specific because they offer something we cannot as a brand. And they do drive a lot of large volumes, but they offer home delivery, which is what Chinese like. So they just buy online, and 2 hours later, someone will come at their door and deliver the paper ticket, and they will pay in cash. So that's the kind of service that we cannot match as Air France. And actually, Ctrip is making more sales than Air France is in China, specifically. But they're a travel agency. Okay. But we cannot compete against that. That's not something we want to do.
It's okay, no question anymore, no comments. I thank you very much again for being here. Thanks a lot.